Okay, so this is the last among the what do you call the toxicants which are supposed to study, that is radioactive waste. Radioactive waste, it is otherwise known as nuclear waste. They are the waste which contain radioactive substances, and they form a major source of radiation hazards to organisms and the entire ecosystem. They are produced mostly during various activities like mining and processing of radioactive ores. For example, uh, when we are sand mining and the sand contains more amount of thorium, obviously the mining can produce radioactive radiation hazards. So when they are being processed for separating the radioactive substance, radioactive element, for example, thorium alone from the whole ore. Again, processing also can cause radiation hazard. Okay. Now, the use of radioactive materials in nuclear power plants, for example, Kudankulam or such kind of nuclear power plants, uh, uh, the radioactive isotopes are being used, isn't it? And when they are being used, the radiation is being released, and even the radioactive waste, the nuclear waste from these nuclear power plants, they have to be scientifically properly disposed, otherwise it can result in radiation hazards. Okay, then use of radioactive isotopes in medical, industrial and research applications. There are plenty of areas where radioisotopes are used, and these can also result in radioactive waste and as a result radiation hazards. Then use of radioactive materials in nuclear weapons. Now, the commonest exposure of human beings to radiation occurs during the diagnostic use of X-rays, then radioactive isotopes and radioactive traces, for example, iodine, radioactive iodine, then these are being used for medical purposes as tracers and all. So those during those activities, actually the humans are exposed to the radiations. Okay, now the nuclear fallout from atomic blasts or nuclear explosions and radioactive waste from nuclear plants are other major sources of anthropogenic radioactive waste. The atomic explosions or nuclear explosions release large quantities of radioactive isotopes. Even the you may remember that in many situations we test these kinds of weapons, isn't it, which contains the radioactive molecules. So even in that case also it releases a huge amount of radiation into the atmosphere, into the ecosystem, and these also release large quantities of radioactive isotopes. Uh, Such isotopes released into the atmosphere, it forms the radioactive dust. And this dust later, it is released into the atmosphere, but later after some time it falls on the Earth's surface, and this is what is referred as a radioactive fallout. It is also known as nuclear fallout or atomic fallout. And the radioactive gases from nuclear plants, it may be gaseous, liquid or solid. Okay, even that also can cause the radiation hazards. Now, radioactive waste contain radioactive isotopes, like you can see iodine 121, iodine 130, then cesium 137, you have strontium 90, etc. And most commonest among these radioactive isotopes used are the first four actually. That is strontium 90, iodine 129, iodine 130, cesium 137. And other radioactive isotopes used include like phosphorus, carbon, beryllium, etc. Okay. Now, what are the radiation hazards? You can see that radioactive pollution, it seriously affects the health and of organisms and even the environment. Atmospheric and climatic conditions such as wind, temperature, rainfall also determine their effects. Now, radiation effects can be somatic or genetic. That is, somatic effects where there is direct results of the action of radio isotopes on cells and tissues are seen, while genetic effects include the indirect effects produced by changes in the genetic makeup. That is, it could be gene or the chromosome as such. Now, these radiation effects are usually unpredictable, usually seen very late after the exposure. It could be even long lasting. Okay, the commonest effects of radiation are that is kills plants and destroys animal tissues. It breaks down nucleic acids and proteins, induces harmful mutations, adversely affects gene mechanism, heredity, metabolism, and adaptability. causes metabolic, cardiovascular, renal, nervous, endocrine disorders, and very seriously affects immune mechanism. It causes malformations and hereditary diseases. It causes skin, bone, and blood cancers. It impairs thyroid functioning and disrupts energy metabolism. Radioactive pollution of the atmosphere may severely damage the stratospheric ozone shield, and hence it can also result in the what you call global. It can actually contribute to global warming. Atmospheric radioactive pollution may bring about a sudden drop in global temperature, and this is referred as the nuclear winter. Okay, now these isotopes, it may settle on the plant parts, accumulate in soil and water. Herbivorous animals get them from plant food, and this enter the food chain. And these radioisotopes, it gets biomagnified in the successive trophic levels. So these are the major effects on environment and organisms. Okay, right. So thank you. Okay, so the next concept is xenobiotic. Xenobiotic, the word is derived from Greek term. The xeno means foreign. Okay, so it is actually includes those chemicals which are man-made, do not occur naturally on Earth. It is any chemical substance found within an organism that is not naturally produced, and it is, or it may be not expected to be present within the organism. So it is actually foreign material, right? They are also called recalcitrants as they resist degradation to maximum level. That is, it can, these kinds of xenobiotics cannot be broken down. This may be grouped as carcinogens, drugs, environmental pollutants, food additives, hydrocarbons, and pesticides. Okay, so here you can see these are xenobiotics. Okay, so there's a chemical found in organisms which are not normally present or not produced naturally or only by synthetic processes. And few examples are given. For example, drugs which we intake as a medication purpose, DDT, like which enter the food chain by way of like biomagnification, etc. Then PCBs, obviously the chemicals, the synthetic ones. Okay, then dioxins, that is by burning of PVC materials. Okay, dioxin gas is produced, so that is again a like synthetic product. Then the bisphenol A. Okay, those bottles which are formed as in a BPA, it is known as sources BPA. So all these are xenobiotics. Okay, and in one way or the other, it may enter the human body. So that is why it is known as a xenobiotic. That is okay. That is foreign substance which enter the body of the organism, but it is not normally produced. It is not supposed to be normally present, or it may not be produced in the body. Okay, that is xenobiotic. Okay, so it includes these chemicals. These are few examples. Okay, what are the effects? DDT, for example, it is an endocrine disruptor. That is, the normal endocrine function is disrupted. It's a carcinogenic, persistent organic pollutant. That is, it remains as such without getting broken down, and it is an organochloric compound. That is why it is an organic pollutant. Right. So, odorless organic organochlorine compound for which is known for industrial property. That is DDT. So it is here. It is all related with DDT. Okay, earlier actually during the Second World War, there was a huge increase in the cases of malaria. So as a what you call, to bring down the mosquito population, actually that was where DDT was used for the first time. Okay, and it was actually sprayed. The people were brought and they were actually made naked, and this DDT was sprayed on them directly without even knowing that it has such a devastating effect on the organism. Right. So at that time, it was used as a mosquito killer. Okay, to curb down the malarial, what you call the number. Right. So that is what is about the xenobiotics. Okay. Okay. Here you can see the sources of the types of xenobiotics. There are two types of xenobiotics, that is exogenous and endogenous. The exogenous type means it is completely foreign, right? It is introduced into the body and includes drugs, food additives, pollutants, insecticides, carcinogens, etc., which we just saw in the previous slide. Okay, There are endogenous xenobiotics as well, and it includes the bilirubin, bile acids, steroids, etc. As such, it is not present, but it is produced through certain reactions. Okay, so that is why it has been considered as a xenobiotic. Okay, fine.